Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, give you the insights you really need.
To be truly well-informed.
Exactly. And today, well, if you've been following global events, the conflict in Ukraine, it just feels stuck, doesn't it?
Intractable is the word that comes to mind. A real quagmire.
Yeah, shifting front lines, terrible human cost, and this feeling of deadlock. Like we're just trapped in this loop. Escalation, destruction, repeat.
And you hear these calls, absolute victory, total surrender.
Right, but the reality, it feels like we're just digging deeper, further from any real resolution. So today, we're tackling that head on. We're doing a deep dive into an idea that maybe at first glance sounds like, well, like settling.
Or maybe even capitulation to some.
The idea of imperfect peace. We want to move past those simple ideas, win or lose, and look at actual pathways to stability, even if they're complex, messy even.
And our sources for this are really interesting. A series of articles from Barackface published just recently, mid-August 2025.
Yeah, and these aren't just news reports. They offer a really nuanced take, looking at peace, global relations, the geopolitical realities, drawing on history, current problems.
And crucially, they're framing a political solution, not just military.
That's the core of it. So our mission today is to unpack why this imperfect peace might not just be necessary, pragmatically speaking, but maybe the most desirable outcome, maybe even the most just outcome for everyone caught up in this.
It's a bold claim.
It is. We'll get into the specific proposals from these articles, the big geopolitical shifts that make this approach seem compelling now, and the history that often gets lost in the headlines.
So when you hear imperfect peace, does your mind automatically jump to giving in?
That's the instinct, right? But these sources really challenge that. They argue that real pragmatism, maybe even real justice, means embracing that complexity.
Exactly. The argument is that sticking to the current military path, it just doesn't offer justice for anyone, really. It promises more destruction, more suffering, a more unstable world.
So finding a way to stop the killing, even if it means tough compromises.
Painful compromises.
Painful ones, yeah. That becomes the most immediate form of justice you can actually achieve. It's about seeing the limits of military options and using political imagination instead.
It's the only viable way forward, according to these sources.
Okay, so let's start by really digging into why this conflict feels so stuck, why this stalemate. These sources are excellent at laying out the narratives. Deeply entrenched narratives of betrayal, of distrust, on all sides.
And these aren't just talking points, they're deeply felt historical grievances.
Absolutely. Each side feels profoundly wronged, and that baggage, that history, makes any easy fix almost impossible without a big shift in thinking.
So where do we start? Ukraine's perspective.
Let's start there. The articles really capture this palpable sense of betrayal from Ukraine's side. You have to remember, Ukraine once had the world's third largest nuclear arsenal.
Which they gave up voluntarily.
Right. In 1994, the Budapest Memorandum. And in return, they got explicit security assurances, sovereignty, territorial integrity from major powers, including Washington and Moscow.
Assurances that proved fragile.
To put it mildly. Then came 2014, the little green men, as the sources remind us, those unmarked Russian soldiers slipping into Crimea.
Followed quickly by annexation.
Yeah.
And then the conflict flared up in Donbass.
And this isn't ancient history for Ukrainians. It's a raw wound. It fuels this deep mistrust, makes any talk of trading territory incredibly sensitive, painful.
It underscores their vulnerability, despite those promises.
Exactly. Broken promises loom large. It cements this narrative, victim of aggression, let down by international guarantees again and again.
And that feeling, that sense of betrayal, it's mirrored on the Russian side, completely mirrored, just through a different historical lens.
How so?
Well, Russia feels betrayed too, specifically about NATO expansion after the Cold War ended. The sources really emphasize this point. Moscow believes it was promised, maybe informally, but promised nonetheless, that NATO wouldn't move east even an inch after Germany reunified.
An understanding about Europe's new security setup.
That was the idea from their perspective. But then NATO did expand. Former Warsaw Pact countries joined, and the alliance got closer and closer to Russia's borders. Ukraine potentially joining was, for Moscow, a major red line.
And the sources use historical analogies to explain this anxiety.
They do. Powerful ones. Napoleon in 1812, Hitler's Operation Barbarossa in 1941. These aren't just history lessons. They tap into a deep national trauma, this fear of invasion from the West.
So any Western military presence nearby feels like an existential threat.
That's the perspective. Ukraine and NATO, simply too close for comfort. an intolerable security risk. So, Russia frames its actions not as aggression, but as defense, responding to perceived encroachment, broken promises.
Regardless of how NATO sees its own expansion.
Precisely. And that fundamental clash in understanding motives, intentions, that's a huge part of why we're stuck.
Okay, so we have Ukraine's feeling of betrayal, Russia's feeling of betrayal. What about NATO's view?
NATO has its own strong narrative, its own historical context.
Yeah.
They see the end of the Cold War, the Soviet collapse, as this once-in-a-century political event, a liberation, not some plot against Russia.
And the Eastern European nations joining.
NATO stresses they weren't forced. They clamored to join. After decades under Moscow's control, NATO meant progress, modernization, freedom, security, a break from the past.
And joining wasn't automatic.
No, it required huge reforms. Political, economic, military, aligning with democratic values, market economies. Reforms that, NATO implies, Russia could have pursued too, if it chose that path.
And the nature of the alliance itself.
Fundamentally defensive. That's core to their charter. It's not, as the sources quote, an alliance waiting to invade Russia. It's about collective defense.
So as long as NATO borders aren't attacked.
The alliance is content. Even if, as the authors rather pointedly observe, member states spend unimaginable sums enriching America's military-industrial complex. That's a striking observation about the economics underpinning it all.
And it's important to remember, Ukraine is already getting massive support, right? Everything short of NATO membership.
Everything. Weapons, money, training, intelligence, everything short of boots on the ground, as the sources put it, which shows robust support doesn't require formal membership.
So you have these clashing narratives, deeply felt justifications on all sides, betrayal narratives everywhere. It really shows the gap in understanding.
A profound chasm. And it highlights why standard conflict resolution is so incredibly hard here. You have to acknowledge all these perspectives, even if you don't agree with them, to even start.
It's truly fascinating, isn't it, how these different stories of betrayal aren't just history, they're actively driving the current deadlock.
And that leads directly to this stark conclusion the sources keep coming back to. Given these immovable narratives, a purely military approach just can't work anymore.
They state it very clearly.
Unequivocally, there is no military solution. That's not presented as opinion. It's stated as a hard truth based on the realities of modern war and geopolitics.
Yeah.
The military path, it's been tried, devastatingly. And it only leads to more destruction, endless destruction.
But why specifically no military solution? What's the underlying logic there?
Well, the sources point to the geopolitical reality. No major power is putting boots on the ground. So it becomes a proxy war.
And proxy wars tend to lead to?
Attritional stalemates.
Yeah.
Defensive capabilities are just too strong now. Breakthroughs are incredibly costly, maybe impossible. It's attritional warfare that just grinds down lives, resources, hope. No clean victory possible.
So it's not just a tactical problem, it's a strategic dead end. It locks everyone into suffering without achieving their goals, even with all that Western aid we mentioned.
Weapons, money, training, intel.
The war drags on, but without an endgame. There's no clear military path for either side that doesn't risk unacceptable costs or even global escalation.
And the sources are skeptical of partial fixes too, like just swapping land.
Why is that?
Because if that core NATO question isn't resolved, they argue, Kyiv would still be in his Putin sights. It doesn't fix Russia's perceived security problem.
So this premise, no military solution, really sets the stage for the rest of the discussion.
Absolutely. If military action is a dead end, then political imagination isn't just an option, it's the only viable path forward. It really forces us to question the long-term effectiveness of just pouring in military aid without a clear political strategy, without an off-ramp.
It forces us to ask, what if the answer isn't pushing harder on the battlefield, but thinking smarter, bolder at the negotiating table?
Okay, so if a military win is off the table, what does a political solution actually involve? These Barackface articles don't just talk in generalities. They lay out a very specific and, let's say, bold blueprint.
Bold is definitely the word. It challenges a lot of conventional thinking, proposes steps that might sound radical.
Yeah, let's start with the one they call, quite provocatively, the stupidest line in Ukraine's constitution. Yes, this is maybe the most striking proposal. The sources state, flat out, that Ukraine's constitutional line declaring its intent to join NATO may be the stupidest sentence written in a modern constitution.
That's strong language.
It is. And they explain why they see it as so problematic, so counterproductive to peace.
So what's the argument?
Well, first, Writing it down doesn't make it happen. As they say, writing it doesn't make you a member. Second, they point out, no other country put that aspiration in its constitution before joining NATO. It wasn't a prerequisite.
So why is it stupid or problematic in their view?
Because, they argue, it acts as this constant, unnecessary red flag waved at Russia's doorstep. A provocation. It gives Russia a permanent casus belli, a reason to object, regardless of NATO's actual plans or intentions.
So it's strategically unwise, offers no real benefit but creates a huge downside.
That's the argument. It provides a pretext. So they propose that Ukraine unilaterally removing this line, difficult as that would be politically in Kiev,
Would be a major step toward peace.
yes, directly opening the door to real negotiations by tackling one of Russia's main stated security issues head-on.
It shows how symbolic things, even non-binding constitutional lines, can escalate tension, shut down diplomacy.
Exactly. A seemingly small internal change could have huge geopolitical effects. It's a very bold, almost counterintuitive idea, asking Ukraine for a significant strategic concession.
For the sake of peace, okay, what's next in this blueprint?
Building on that, they suggest a major internal restructuring for Ukraine, committing to a federal structure.
Federalism, what does that entail here?
Not just a vague idea. They suggest models with real, broad regional autonomy, giving regions significant control over things like education, local police, infrastructure, language rights, cultural protections.
And the rationale, why propose this?
It's presented not as capitulation to Russia, but as survival for Ukraine as a unified state and actually a sign of democratic maturity.
So an internal solution to internal diversity.
Precisely. Addressing potential ethnic or linguistic divisions, especially in historically complex regions like Donbass or Crimea. The idea is this could satisfy local populations by empowering them.
And crucially, remove a pretext for outside interference.
Right. It shows a commitment to diverse governance internally, aiming to make that diversity a strength, not a vulnerability.
Okay, so constitutional change, federal structure. What about the really thorny issues? The disputed territories, the refugees?
They have a roadmap for that, too. First step. Demilitarize the contested territories, those areas under Russian control or heavily fought over. Pull back forces.
Right then.
Deploy robust international peacekeepers. This is presented as essential. Create a safe, neutral zone first. You need that to build any trust, stop more fighting.
Makes sense. You can't talk peace with guns blazing.
Absolutely not. And linked directly to that is the humanitarian piece. The millions of Ukrainian refugees who fled since 2014, especially since 2022, they must be allowed to return home.
This isn't just logistics, is it?
No, it's fundamental. Healing, rebuilding lives, restoring dignity. It's a core moral point for any lasting peace. Safe, voluntary, dignified return has to be prioritized.
Okay, demilitarization, peacekeepers, refugee return. What's the mechanism for deciding the future of these territories? This is where it gets really controversial.
It is. And this is perhaps the boldest part of the roadmap. Referendums. But with very specific conditions. These referendums would happen in all disputed regions, including Crimea, but only after a significant stabilization period, say 6 months.
6 months of demilitarization, peacekeepers, refugees returning.
Yes. Time to establish neutrality and allow people to come home.
Yeah.
And crucially, the sources stress, these votes would be conducted by ballots, not tanks, with legitimate international oversight. That's key after years of conflict and disputed votes.
And what choices would people have?
3 clear options. 1, join a federal Ukraine with all those guaranteed rights, autonomy, language, culture. 2, declare independence as a sovereign state. Or 3, join Russia. Wow, that really puts the decision in the hands of the people living there.
It raises a big question, doesn't it? How does empowering local populations like this, after stabilization, under supervision, change the whole game?
It's a fundamental shift, away from military conquest towards self-determination. The sources argue this is the only realistic political path to peace. You can't force a durable peace, they say. It has to have some basis in the will of the people in those contested areas.
It acknowledges the complex identities there, the ties to both Ukraine and Russia.
Exactly. It offers a democratic way for those voices to be heard without coercion. And importantly, the authors suggest this approach avoids setting the dangerous precedent of validating territorial gain by force. Instead, it defers to the democratic will, properly expressed.
It suggests that national integrity is vital, yes, but maybe so is a consent of the governed, especially in places so torn by war. This whole framework, it's a massive pivot from military means to a detailed political plan.
Right. Let's zoom out a bit now,
Uh,
because these articles don't just focus on Ukraine in isolation. They connect it brilliantly to the bigger picture, the changing world order. They really argue for a fundamental shift in how major powers interact, moving beyond outdated Cold War thinking.
yeah, they specifically call out this idea you sometimes hear, trying to snatch Russia away from China.
They call that an outdated zero-sum Cold War mindset, flat out.
Their point is,
We live in a multipolar world now. It's not just two superpowers anymore. The whole game has changed. Think about how much more complex everything is. Choices everywhere. Global politics is like that too.
multiple centers of power. India, the US, China, Russia.
Each with their own interests, economic clout, ambitions. And the sources say this isn't just interesting, it's the defining reality. It demands a totally different approach.
So the goal isn't isolating rivals anymore.
No. The goal, they argue, is actually that it is good for all parties if the major powers, India, the US, China, and Russia, do their best to improve relations with each other. Cooperation, even among diverse powers, is key for stability now, not competition that risks destabilizing everything.
So we can't think of global politics like a two-player chess game anymore.
Exactly. And they give a really concrete example of this multipolar reality, India's role, its stabilizing influence and unique diplomatic position.
How so?
Well, look at how India maintained its steady friendship with Russia, even deepened it, while the Ukraine war raged and the West tried to isolate Moscow.
And the sources see that continuity as a good thing.
Yes, because it has prevented extreme misunderstandings and acted as a safety valve during peak U.S.-Russia tension. India keeping lines open with both sides was and is a vital diplomatic asset based on decades of its independent foreign policy.
And at the same time, India's ties with the US have also grown.
Flourished, the sources say, despite issues like the ongoing tariff war, which they note many economists worry could push the U.S. economy towards stagflation, a major risk.
So India has strong ties with both the US and Russia. That puts it in a unique spot.
A powerful mediating role. The Ukraine war, they argue, offers a rare opportunity because both the U.S. and Russia can leverage their friendships with India to seek out a political solution.
And that wouldn't just stop the fighting.
It would build trust for future cooperation between these giants. It shows how flexible, non-aligned policy can actually boost global stability.
Is there historical precedent for this kind of role?
Yes, the sources remind us Russia has often played a stabilizing role between India and China in tense moments, helping de-escalate things. Dialogue, not dominance, works. India shows how maintaining diverse relationships is a strength, offering paths for mediation.
Okay, so this multipolar view leads to a broader agenda, beyond just Ukraine.
Definitely. Resolving Ukraine is part of a bigger need for global stability, which also requires, they argue, resolving the India-China border dispute once and for all, a huge flashpoint.
And dealing with Taiwan?
Yes, addressing the Taiwan issue in a way that ensures no hot war, now or later. These conflicts aren't separate. They're symptoms of an outdated global system.
And there's an economic dimension, too.
A huge one. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the solutions for Ukraine fit into this larger shift needed in how powers interact and build economic frameworks. The sources stress the urgent need for a new trade architecture, one that reflects multipolar realities instead of deepening divisions.
Challenging purely punitive economic measures.
Implicitly, yes. If sanctions lead to global instability or stagflation, are they effective? They argue for pragmatic normalization. The U.S. cannot realistically sever Russia's ties with China or India anyway in this new world. The U.S. can choose to normalize trade and relations with Moscow. This wouldn't just help global markets, it would open diplomatic channels for other big issues.
It's a call for a holistic approach, seeing conflicts and economics as interconnected.
Exactly. Stability through engagement and integration, not just antagonism and isolation. That's the argument for how to navigate this interwoven global tapestry.
Okay, we've mapped out the problem, the narratives, the proposed political path. Now let's really get into this idea of embracing imperfect peace. Because the sources make a powerful case for why it's not just settling, but maybe a genuine triumph.
The most practical, most humane path forward, they argue.
And the core principle is pretty blunt.
It is. Wars rarely end in absolutes. They end in compromises, often messy and unsatisfying. That's a crucial reframing of what success even means here.
But these compromises, however flawed,
are yet preferable to endless destruction. The goal, they insist, is not perfection. It's stopping the violence, silencing the guns, creating a possibility to move forward instead of sinking deeper.
So success isn't some ideal justice satisfying everyone?
No, it's ending suffering,
Yeah.
enabling healing, rebuilding, restoring lives. It's a pragmatic humanitarian calculation. Think about past conflicts. The Korean War ended with an armistice, not a victory parade, but that fragile peace beat continued carnage.
Or the Dayton Accords for Bosnia.
Exactly. Messy, flawed, but it ended a brutal war. History's full of imperfect treaties that saved countless lives.
But this is where it gets tough for many people, right? The idea of pragmatism versus principle, rewarding aggression.
And the sources face that criticism head-on. They acknowledge it's a valid concern. Any settlement rewarding aggression undermines international norms, sets bad precedents. That fear is real. It's a genuine moral dilemma.
So what's the counter-argument?
It's rooted in the brutal reality of what continued war means. While undermining norms is bad, the alternative, a perpetual war with mounting casualties, shattered cities, and a destabilized world economy, offers no justice either.
What justice is there in endless funerals, kids growing up in rubble, a global economy on the edge?
Precisely. They argue that ending the bloodshed, even at a cost, creates the space for rebuilding Ukraine, healing families, reestablishing stability, however fragile in Europe.
So it's a hard choice. Sometimes the greater good of stopping the killing outweighs sticking rigidly to principles of punishment, especially if sticking to principles means endless war.
That's the crux of it. It's a choice between an imperfect future and a guaranteed present nightmare.
And they use history to back this up.
Heavily. History shows us that imperfect treaties can still end devastating wars. This isn't some new, radical idea. It's a path humanity has walked before, many times.
So agreements like Westphalia or even the end of World War I, they were imperfect.
Absolutely, full of compromises, unresolved issues, new tensions sometimes. But they serve the vital purpose, ending widespread conflict, letting societies move on, rebuild, often heal over time.
So ultimately, what are the desired outcomes of this imperfect peace deal for Ukraine, according to the sources?
Well, securing Ukraine's sovereignty long-term, maybe within adjusted borders, but with self-determination guaranteed. Normalizing Russia-West relations, moving past this deadlock, and critically getting millions of refugees home to rebuild their lives.
Achieving that would be huge.
The sources call it a triumph of diplomacy over despair, a testament to political will. They go so far as to say achieving this alone would merit recognition at the highest level, that it would be worthy of nothing less than the Nobel Peace Prize.
Wow, that's placing immense value on this kind of diplomatic resolution.
It really is. Because, they argue, an imperfect peace would not only end a war, it would reaffirm the world's belief in diplomacy, compromise, and the human will to coexist.
So it elevates diplomacy, compromise, makes them virtues, not weaknesses.
Exactly. Essential for global stability. A testament to our capacity to coexist, even after terrible conflict. And there's one more forward-looking point they make,
Which is?
that this political path to peace is also the best hope for those who wish to see Russia evolve into a true democracy with free and fair elections.
How does that work?
The idea is that ending the external conflict, normalizing relations, could remove the perceived threats Russia uses to justify its internal clampdown. It might create space for more liberal, democratic forces within Russia to emerge.
So ending the war could unlock internal positive change in Russia, too.
That's the optimistic, long-term hope presented. It's a path not just to ending one war, but maybe fostering a more peaceful, open future for a major global power.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening? It means peace isn't some neat storybook ending. It's a hard one, often messy, but maybe absolutely essential. An act of human will, choosing a viable future, even an imperfect one, over endless destruction. Hashtag, outro. Okay, so let's quickly wrap up what we've covered in this deep dive. We explored this compelling case for imperfect peace in Ukraine, drawn from those insightful Barackface articles.
We saw why they argue a military solution is a dead end and how those deep narratives of betrayal from Ukraine, Russia, NATO fuel the stalemate.
Then we got into the specifics, the bold political proposals. Addressing Ukraine's constitution, committing to federalism, that innovative idea for internationally supervised referendums, ballots, not tanks.
And we connected all to that bigger shift needed embracing a multipolar world, moving beyond zero-sum games, recognizing India's stabilizing role, and building new, inclusive global trade frameworks.
And ultimately, the argument that peace, even imperfect, is the most pragmatic, most humane, maybe even the most just outcome compared to endless war.
Mm-hmm.
So for you listening, whether you're prepping for a meeting, just catching up, or genuinely curious about these huge global challenges. Understanding these nuances is key.
It helps you see past the simplistic headlines, have those aha moments, and be truly well-informed.
Which brings us to a final thought. This raises an important question. What really stands out to you about how these proposals try to balance those deeply held ideals and principles with the harsh realities of war and suffering?
Yeah, where's the tension point for you?
And maybe, what new conversations does this open up for you personally or in your work, in a world that often demands clear winners, absolute victories? What's the hardest part about embracing an imperfect peace?
And conversely, what could the profound benefits be if we did dare to embrace it? Not just for Ukraine, but maybe for other tough conflicts around the world.
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.